Hello, Put Me in Coaching family. I hope everyone is having a fantastic day. And I know we're coming to you at a different day than normal. I was traveling yesterday and travel got completely screwed up. So I appreciate everybody's patience. As always, doesn't matter when you get the information, just as long as you are getting the information, right? This is what we call spaced repetition. The more we hear things, the more we put them into practice, and the more often it's repeated, the better off we are in the long run and the more it sticks. So, I want to talk about the concept of stagnation tonight. I was at a training over the weekend and it was just phenomenal to really look at, and this was more of a business training, but again, a lot of concepts of business can be applied to life, right? So, we have solidified our morning routine throughout the last couple years, actually, right? So we all practice some form of a morning routine. We all talk about scripting. We've talked so much about that in the last few classes. And one concept that came up in this training was a lot of stuff that we've been talking about how this is what we need to do. But the concept of stagnation, because what happens when we hit those plateaus, right? We've talked and done classes on breaking plateaus before, and really just understanding how do we continue to fight through the plateaus, or in this case, stagnation is the term we're talking about, right? So that's where it's important to have that solid routine, right? In the what we eat, what we think, and what we do. And when we can get all of those working together, we can really focus on hitting our goals and figuring out what it is that we need to do and where we want to go. And so the concept of stagnation, right? When you're thinking about stagnation, right? That's staying exactly where you are, even though you might be continuing to do something. So it's not like you're just sitting still and not doing anything, but you're doing the same thing over and over, which is great when what you're doing is working. But when what you're doing is not working and you're not hitting your goals, you're not where you want to be, and you're not making progress towards your goals anymore, it might be time to reevaluate. And you've got to really look at, okay, this is where I'm at. This is where I want to be, right? And I'm reevaluating, is what I'm doing going to get me there? Or do I need to implement step 5 of the 7-step signature system, some behavior modification, right? Do I need to change a couple of the things that I'm doing to get to where I want to be, either faster or just simply start moving the needle again? And what's crazy about stagnation, right? It's the compound effect. We've talked about the compound effect, that those daily disciplines practiced over time lead to success. But the daily neglect compounded over time leads to something other than success, right? I don't even like to say the word. But what I gathered from this training was this one phrase. And it was so powerful that it really made me stop and think. This is where a lot of people get stuck, right? Stagnation will not have a conversation with you before it takes advantage of you. Stagnation won't have a conversation with you before it takes advantage of you. And so this is why step 4 of the 7-step signature system, tracking, is so important. That's the conversation that you're having with yourself day in and day out to say, hey, am I doing what needs to be done? Or am I going to let stagnation come in and take over and not have that conversation with me before it just completely takes over? And then 6 months down the road, I'm nowhere closer to where I want to be. All right. So when we think about the stagnation, you've got to keep moving, but you have to evaluate where you are to see, do I need to change something up? Is something not clicking? Right. And then you've got to build and rebuild, right? Because something's always going, we're always coming up with new goals, right? And somebody was talking about this weekend, they were talking about how they've been a runner for the last 12 years. However, he's starting to train now for a half marathon and he hasn't been consistent. And this is the power and the law of consistency. And we've talked about this briefly too. So we've got stagnation, right? And then we've got, okay, what do we need to change? What do we need to get consistent with to be able to continue to move so that we don't stay stagnant? We continue to move and reach our goals. And so the example he gave was so powerful. And I can apply this to weightlifting, I can apply it to anything. We can apply it to weight loss, weight gain, whatever it is your goals are. You can apply it to your health, your career, everything. Right. So he just recently, about 3 weeks ago, started training for a half marathon that he's going to run in April. Now, for the last several months, it just, the consistency hasn't been there. So while he's been running for 12 years, the consistency in running has not been there. Right. So he's basically starting from scratch. And I think this is where we get so frustrated and so disgusted, for lack of a better term, with ourselves when we find ourselves having to start over. But guess what? We already know what to do. We just have to put one foot in front of the other. We can't stay stagnant, right? We have to start moving the needle in the right direction again. And so he gave the example that somebody stopped him on the street and said, "Well, how long have you been doing this? How long have you been running?" And he didn't really know how to answer that question. Because he's like, "Well, I've been running for like 12 years, but I haven't been consistent. So I'm really kind of starting over." And it was eye opening to him because he's like, "I don't want to start over. I don't want to do this. Like, I don't want to start over." And so we think about that, and we think about just that level of consistency that it takes. And again, it's just that 1% better every day. He also talked about this device, this button he has on his boat, right? He's got this button on his boat that he can press that will course correct 1%. And I think this is a really good concept to get through our heads, because when we get that all or nothing mentality, when we think to ourselves, okay, I've got to go completely the opposite rather than just making a small change and shaping the behavior over time, right? Because that's what's going to lead to your lasting results, right? You don't just get up. It's the same concept. You don't just get up and go run a marathon, right? You have to train for it. You don't just get up and go lift whatever weight it is that you have a goal to lift. You have to train for it. You have to shape your muscles and shape your endurance to be able to do those things. The same thing goes for eating right and getting healthy if you want it to be a lasting change. So you have to, when you go 0 to 300, right? You get that concept of, like, if you're on that boat and you're not using that button to course correct 1%, you're just turning the wheel. Your body and your brain is going to say, "Oh my gosh, what are we doing?" Right? So that's why when we talk about what we're eating, if we can just take the crowding out principle and do that and start there, then it's going to add up, and those habits are going to add up over time. And so it's that compound effect, those daily disciplines added up over time that lead to those lasting successful results. So I thought that was really powerful. The law of consistency. And then just again, that stagnation is huge. We have to continuously evaluate where we are. And then they talked about the concept of celebrating all wins. Well, guess what? Hello, step 6 of the 7-step signature system, right? Celebrate all wins. And no win is too small. So when we think of terms of I just lost or I only lost, or well, I just did this for only a day, right? So words like just and only, they're very diminishing, I should say, not demeaning, but diminishing. It takes the hard work you've done and the effort that you've put in, and it doesn't acknowledge it. It diminishes that effort. So I had a conversation today with one of my clients, and this is one of my behavior clients, and she was talking about how everyone says she's really good at doing her makeup, and she is. She's phenomenal. And she doesn't like to be told that she's good at doing makeup because in her eyes, one, everyone's good at doing makeup. And two, that's not a skill that she should be proud of because it was easy for her to accomplish. And so we peeled back the layers of the onions a little bit. And I said, well, I'm going to challenge you. I said, what got you interested in makeup? What made you want to learn? And she told me the story. And I said, well, then that's a little bit deeper skill, because what that tells me is you are really good at discernment and figuring out what you want and then figuring out how to learn how to get what you want. And that's a skill, right? That's a talent. She's naturally good at that. And so when we think about things like that, that's celebrating a win, right? She set a goal and she did whatever she needed to do to figure out how to achieve that goal. And so that's really the win there, right? So she should be proud because honestly, she does makeup better than anybody I've ever seen do makeup almost. And it's incredible, right? And so when we think in terms of celebrating our wins, right? They did a study, and I can't remember who did this study, but they followed people that were put in isolation, right? And they had one group that absolutely thrived in isolation and another group that absolutely did not, right? They had a lot of mental health issues coming out of isolation. And you would think that the introverts may naturally thrive in isolation, but it wasn't that. It was the people that started speaking in the you terms. So they would say, you can do this. You're going to be okay. You've got this, right? You're strong. You can make it through this. And they were having conversations with themselves, but using the you language, they were able to trick their subconscious into believing that they have a connection, right? Because we all have to have some sort of connection to thrive. And so when we think about that, the stagnation, a lot of times we get into that rut of, well, I have to do this, I have to do that. I'm doing this and I'm doing that. And that stagnation just is there, right? Because it's just the same thing over and over and over. And so if we can change our language to start using the positive self-talk, but speaking in the you language, and we still do our I am statements like I am achieving my goals, I'm doing all of this. But then when we can think and we do our auto suggestions, right, that we're talking to ourselves in the mirror, maybe giving a pep talk, you can use the you language, right? You are phenomenal. You are incredible. All of those things. And it can really shift your subconscious into doing exactly what you need it to do. That's the power of our subconscious mind. It's always going to do what we need it to do because it doesn't distinguish. Our subconscious just does whatever we're feeding it. So, whatever we are giving our subconscious mind is actually what's manifesting. So, if we continue to say, well, I have trouble with this or I'm struggling with this, right? It's okay to acknowledge that, but that can't be your story, right? You've got to have the desire level and you've got to have the belief level that you can do it, right? That you can learn what you need to learn and that you can have the discipline it takes to reach your goals, right? You have to believe that because if you start not believing it, then you're feeding your subconscious the story of, I can't do this, right? And I know y'all have all heard me tell the story about my pitching coach in fourth grade. I could not say the word can't, right? That was just not allowed in my vocabulary. And when I think back, like, how am I here 30 years later remembering that experience with her? Because she was not going to let me say that when it came to pitching techniques. It's like, we do not say that around here. Not going to happen. So when we think like that, we start to really change our narrative. We change our story. And then that stagnation cannot come into play because we are constantly motivating, using the discipline. We're constantly evaluating and tracking and holding ourselves accountable. And so we're able to make those 1% shifts so that we can be consistent. You see how all of this fits together. And it just simply starts with feeding your subconscious mind the correct narrative. And when we can continue to do that and continue to build on that, that's where we start to make the real progress. When our subconscious no longer allows us to tell the story of failure, it only allows us to tell the story of success, of those 1% changes. It only allows us to tell the story of our belief level. It only allows us to tell the story of our focus level. Right? So, really think about, are you communicating your vision to your subconscious? Are you communicating your goals to your subconscious on a daily basis? And if you're not, figure out what you need to do that. And then start speaking in that you language so that your subconscious starts to understand that, hey, you absolutely can do this. You absolutely have the skills to have the discipline that's going to compound to lead to that 1% better every day. And over the next 2 months that we have left in the year, you can make massive, massive progress toward your goals. But you've got to get rid of the stagnation because stagnation does not have a conversation with you before it takes advantage of you. And so look back and see, has it been taking advantage of you? And then decide that that stops now and decide what it is you need to do to change that narrative so that you can be on top of it and you can start making that progress and kickstart so you can get rid of the stagnation, get over that plateau, and really take charge of where it is you want to be. All right, so that's what we have for tonight. I will not see you next Sunday. I will be on an airplane again. So I will not be here next Sunday. So we will take this next week off. Take that time to go back and watch the replays. And then we will be back here November 9th. So November 9th, and I may do a quick video from Hawaii at some point. I just don't know when we're going to get there. So I don't want you to bank on having a class. But I may, still do a quick video to just kind of keep the motivation going between here and there. All right, so I am wishing you all a ton of success. Let's get the ball moving. Let's get moving toward our goals so that we can close out 2025 strong with a lot of progress moving into 2026, so we continue to have the momentum we need to reach our goals. Thankful for each and every one of you. I will see you back here on the 9th for formal class, but we'll probably come to you from Hawaii live at some point just to hang out and say hello and check in with everybody. So I appreciate each and every one of you. Let's go be successful, and I will see you.